I am beating my backlog, and it's a big one. I've been neglecting and adding to this ever-growing list of games for years now, and in this series we're going to play them one by one while I give you my honest opinion on the experience. So let's get started on the backlog with the next game on our list, Assassin's Creed Syndicate. I've been slowly working my way through the Assassin's Creed series one by one, with Syndicate the latest up to bat. Hard to believe, but this is the 9th installment in the series, releasing in 2015, right after Unity, which released in 2014. They were really going back to back with Assassin's Creed games at this point. The main story is set in London in 1868 at the onset of the Second Industrial Revolution, and follows twin assassins Jacob and Evie Fry as they dive into organized crime and take back the city from the Templar control. The first time we see the option of 2 playable characters, which is definitely a cool twist. That being said, after playing so many Assassin's Creed games over the last year or so, I'll be honest that they are starting to blend together a bit. Unity was a perfectly fine game, but nothing really stood out. It played things safe and really rode the formula, so after the amazing breath of fresh air that was Black Flag and Rogue, I went into Syndicate with high hopes it might deliver a more unique experience compared to Unity. Now before we delve into the game, I have to address the giant ugly elephant in the room, the future storyline. Similar to Unity, you play as an unnamed protagonist in the future, working to help the assassins recover an artifact to fight the Templars, but similar to the previous few installments, the storyline has such waning interest or relevance in any regard. I mean, the future story gets interjected so few times with such long stretches in between, it's amazing that anyone could care about it at this point. Every time you're abruptly removed from the London storyline to be force-fed this nothing burger is really frustrating. Assassin's Creed 3 is the last title where I was actually enthusiastic about the storyline outside the Animus, but after the cliffhanger we were left on, the sudden axing of Desmond, the main character, just to be given this dumpster fire that Ubisoft calls writing is insulting. The future storyline is dead in the water, and from what I understand, this is the last title that really progresses this future story at all. Probably for the best. The weird disjointed storytelling is awful, so I'm excited to see what direction AC Origins takes us. Anyways, back to Syndicate. The actual gameplay is pretty straightforward. Similar to every other Assassin's Creed game, you have zones controlled by Templars, and you have to complete missions and activities to take over the zones and unlock the map bit by bit. There's a range of mission types in each zone. The typical assassinate the big bad Templar schmuck. You have stronghold raids where you have to clear the area of like 10 to 25 weaker Templars. You also liberate some children from factories where they're forced to work, and one neat addition, you do have some kidnapping missions. I really liked the idea of kidnapping at first, but I think it was kind of poorly executed. You either sneak up on the target and hold a knife to their back and walk them out of the area, or you can knock them out and take their body. Problem is you are stealthed when you hold the knife to their back, but you walk so extremely slow, so it takes you like 3 to 5 minutes to walk out of the area. It is extremely boring. The other option is that you knock them out, take their body, and run past like 15 dudes, and then you have to fight everyone at once, and it's just kind of a pain in general, so wasn't a fan of those missions, but the rest were all pretty fun, as is Assassin's Creed. And like most Assassin's Creed titles, normally they do introduce a few unique elements that set them apart, and Syndicate was no different. Like I mentioned before, you have 2 playable assassins to choose from, Evie being more stealth-based and Jacob more action-forward. They each have their own skill tree and more unique upgrades as well. They give you a grappling hook, which is probably the most fun I've had in Assassin's Creed since the boats from Black Flag. It makes the chore of climbing tall buildings really engaging and fun by propelling you to the top within a few seconds, instead of that super boring process of like slowly making your way up. And on top of that, you can also zip line between buildings, which made traversing the world just a lot smoother in general. They also added a gang mechanic, which felt really similar to previous games where you could recruit rookie assassins to fight for you, but it did add a gang upgrade menu where you could spend some of your currency and make your gang members stronger. It also gave you some passive buffs like income from missions and overtime from your hideout as well. While we're on the subject of the gang system, I'll bring up my first major criticism. Everyone in your gangs, as well as all the Templar gangs, are basically just nameless and characterless mooks. I think having some gang leaders in your squad that have backstories, strengths, weaknesses, etc. would have made upgrading your gang a lot more meaningful. Even the Templar gangs, they only have 1 leader per zone, but they may as well just be randomly generated by an AI. You complete all these missions to uproot them, and there's 0 character building for these gang leaders. You finish clearing their zone, you get thrown into a gang war with these random Templars you've never seen. They're super easy to beat, and it's just a very forgettable experience overall. For a game that rode the criminal underworld shtick so hard, I'm really surprised by how shallow that part of the game is. Anyways, like most Assassin's Creed games, they're absolutely packed with side content to keep you busy. Between repeatable income missions, collections to complete, including a music box set with 32 different items scattered around the map to unlock a special gear set, and 1,000,001 side missions starring famous people from this time era, including things like Charles Darwin, Alexander Graham Bell, and Karl Marx. I will say, despite the enormous amount of side content, I didn't find myself running out of things to spend my currency on like I did very early on in Unity. I would say I did about 75% of side content before I ran out of things to buy. I did all the side missions and I basically just had the chests left over and did, about half of the chests. Compared to in Unity, I did maybe 40% of all side content and then I just had nothing left to buy. So I find that a big improvement. I mean, in these games, when you have nothing left to spend your money on, the motivation to actually do side content just completely evaporates. But since we're talking about side content, one thing I want to touch on is the World War I segment. I think this will go down as one of the more memorable parts of the game for me, despite being very short. You get a glitch in the Animus that lets you travel forward in time to World War I era London, and you're doing some missions for Winston Churchill. I was super surprised by the amount of work they put into this little section of the game. I mean, they made like car assets, tanks, biplanes, artillery, and even zeppelins. This gave me flashbacks to the little section in Assassin's Creed 3 with the boat battles, which they later turned into their own game with Black Flag, as you know. Maybe it's just me, but I'm holding out hope to see an Assassin's Creed game set in one of the World Wars. This gave me a little taste, and all I can say is I want more. And the last thing to really touch on is the story. Well, the actual story, not the dumb future story. I know I complained before about there not being a lot of character building for side characters, and that is very true. But for all the main characters, you definitely get a sense of growth from start to finish with this story, which hasn't really been the case in some previous Assassin's Creed games. Starting off with Evie and Jacob, you're living on the outskirts of London and they really come off as immature and rebellious teens more than anything. But slowly, as they take on more responsibility and tackle larger threats, you get a great sense of growth, and by the end they truly feel like master assassins with what they've been through. There's 10 acts in total with a number of missions in each act, and like with most Assassin's Creed games, you do find the story starts to drag a bit in the middle, but near the end each mission is packed with action and ended up making me basically binge 2 entire acts to finish up the game in one night. And as far as the main cast goes, I think my only complaint is Starrick. Not his character or anything, I think that was perfect. I mean, Ubisoft really has the crafting of crazy evil villains down to a science at this point. I mean, look at basically any antagonist from Far Cry as proof. Anyway, my actual complaint is Starrick simply feels like he doesn't get enough screen time until the very end, which, with such long stretches of gameplay between seeing him, it didn't leave the same scary antagonist vibes as with previous Ubisoft games, where the villain feels like they're always around the corner. We catch little glimpses of him slowly getting more unhinged as he loses lieutenants in his order, and the parts we do see have some great acting, but having him completely detached from every regular mission almost makes him forgettable to a point. With that being said, he is going to go down as one of the most memorable villains for me in Assassin's Creed, only outdone by Haytham from AC3. Well, that about wraps up my thoughts and overall experience with Assassin's Creed Syndicate. A game that suffers the same minor flaws as most past installments. Ubisoft has a formula and they don't dare deviate from it. But even with those minor flaws, this was still one of my favorite Assassin's Creed games by far. The addition of the grappling hook made travel immensely more fun and opened a lot of new ways to complete objectives. Exploring industrial era London was great. Ubisoft never disappoints when it comes to level design, and the story and main characters themselves, I mean, I couldn't have asked anything more. Overall, I would have to place Syndicate in my third favorite slot, only outdone by Rogue and Black Flag, just because of how different and standout they are. Next up, we're going to be tackling Origins, so if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe so you get notified about the next one. Happy gaming!